Hi everyone, welcome to this special Rebel Way course preview on Studio FX Workflows with Hernan Llano. I'm Ian Fales from Befores and Afters. I'm a visual effects journalist, and you might have seen me take you through a couple of these course previews. Well, this one's really exciting because it's all about FXTD work and Studio FX Workflows using Houdini. Before we meet Hernan, let's jump into the really wicked course trailer. Let's play that now.
Welcome to Studio FX Workflows from Rebel Way. In this course, Senior FXTD Hernan Llano will explain how professional studios approach complex VFX projects. Hernan will share secrets he's learned during his time at major VFX studios. His insights stem from his experience as an FXTD at DNEG, effects supervisor at Framestore, and his current position as a senior FXTD at ILM. This is the world's first course designed to turn effects artists into lead effects artists. The course will start by explaining how to tackle VFX problems and think algorithmically. In our first scene, we'll explore advanced concepts like matrix extractions, HDA development, and the RBD framework. This workshop will primarily focus on large-scale destruction and rigid bodies. We will also create custom solvers and HDAs for our scene that mimic real-world production environments. We'll take an in-depth look at ground fracturing, along with complex tree development for CG scenes. Later in the course, we'll prep and analyze even more scenes, giving you the ability to practice the techniques for yourself and build a killer demo reel. By the end, you'll have a foundational understanding of how studios approach complex effects projects. You'll also be ready to implement the concepts on your next major studio gig. This is your chance to learn from a VES award-winning artist. If you've ever wanted to go from artist to lead artist, this course was made specifically for you. You can learn more about the course and see if it's a good fit for you over on Rebel Way. Once a rebel, always a rebel.
Well, there you have it. There's the course trailer for Studio FX Workflows at Rebel Way. That was really fun. Now I'm going to introduce you to the person who'll be running this course, Hernan Llano. Hi, Hernan. How are you?
Hey, Ian. I'm good. Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Really happy to chat to you. You're over in London, right? I'm in Sydney, and you're in a different time zone in London.
Yeah, I'm currently living in London. It's like 9 p.m. here.
Yeah. Yes, and morning for me while we're chatting about your course. Hernan, this course is really fascinating to me because it's something I don't always get to cover in my work as a VFX journalist, and that is some of the core principles of actually setting up effects workflows in Houdini at a studio. You've had lots of experience in big visual effects studios, right? Do you want to take me through some of the big places you worked at?
Yeah, I'm currently working at ILM as a senior FXTD. But before that, I worked 5 years at Framestore, where I started as an FXTD. Then I moved into a senior FXTD role. And then I led some projects as an FX artist. And eventually moved into supervision, where I worked as a CG supervisor for a little while before moving into ILM. And before that, I worked at DNEG for a few months. But I started as a generalist on small companies doing commercials for quite a long time. I've been doing CG for over 12 years now, more or less. Yeah.
Right. And at Framestore in particular, you worked on some projects I really, really love. One of them, I think, was Men. Was that it during the pandemic or just before? I mean, that film, if people watch that, it's so crazy. But I just really wanted to ask you about Men because it's one of my favorite films that went under the radar in the last couple of years, right?
Yeah, that experience was quite interesting. And I cannot tell you much about the insights of what happened in the company, but we worked on these very gory shots and having dailies and seeing all that stuff going on every single day and receiving notes on that was a very particular experience that I will never forget for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun.
I was able to cover the film at befores and afters, but not show any behind the scenes or final imagery of that metamorphosis transformation sequence, but which was such a shame. But anyway, it's incredible effects work by Framestore, including yourself. So I really wanted to give a shout out to that.
Thank you.
And you know, I just wanted to ask before you kind of take us through what's going to be in this Studio FX Workflows course, some of the bigger things that relate to being an FXTD at a studio. I mean, what are some of the tougher things that are a part of being an FXTD?
Well, I think it really depends on the current experience that you have in the industry. So depending on whether you are a junior, a mid, senior, lead, you're going to have different responsibilities. You're going to have different challenges. But in general, no matter your experience, you're going to have to solve problems. So it's always about problem solving and how you use your imagination to come up with new solutions. Every single project has its different problems, its different challenges. So you always feel like you are trying to solve a new problem, even though it looks similar to what you had before. What you are going to see is that you might be using the same system that you used before, but it's not giving you the same results. It's going to look different. So then you have to figure out why. And it's always that, solving problems all the time, trying to come up with solutions. That's the main challenge, together with the deadlines. That's the other challenge. Deadlines are quite tough sometimes.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting answer because, of course, we're talking about using Houdini here. It's a highly technical program, but your answer wasn't about the technical stuff. It's about the problem solving, and so that's a really important skill to have. Of course, you do need to have some technical knowledge and artistic skill for this, but I really like what you say, that it's more about problem solving and thinking, right?
Yeah, actually, this brings me to something that I wanted to mention, and there is usually this distinction between FX artists and FXTDs, which I don't personally share. I feel like if you are going to get into FX, especially as a Houdini user, you are expected to be both technical and artistic in some way. You don't, depending on your background, you're going to have more skills as a technical artist, or maybe as an, like maybe you learned photography or cinematography, and that's going to guide you more in the direction of art. But in general, you are expected to be good in both situations, both in art and technically. So I try to stay away from that distinction of FX artists and FXTDs. For me, they're both the same.
Yeah, really interesting point. Why don't we jump into a preview of the Studio FX Workflows? You've got a PowerPoint presentation there. Let's jump into that, Hernan, and you can take us through it.
Sounds good. So I'm going to share my screen.
Awesome.
So let me know when you can see it.
Got it. Go for it.
Okay, so I'm just going to talk you through about the workshop and what my plan is with it and what I expect you to learn and what you should expect from the workshop. It's going to be really brief, but I hope it gives you some insights on what we're going to be looking into. So what is this workshop about? When I started creating the workshop, I had mainly two things in mind. One was how to approach problems, and the other one was good practices. And to me, those are the two main things that I want you to take away from this workshop. And the way I'm going to show you how to approach problems and how to learn how to keep good practices, it's by using two projects that I'm going to show you in a moment. But my approach for this whole workshop, it's going to be the next. I'm going to talk you through what we need to do. I'm going to mention the tools that we need and what are going to be the inputs and the outputs that we're going to both receive and create. And what you see in the screen is an example. On the left, you see that I have this diagram where I'm showing a future OTL that we're going to be creating, which is going to be the RBD solver. And on the top, you can see what's going to be the inputs. And on the bottom, you can see what are going to be the outputs. So we're going to talk through that. We are going to make some assumptions of what we need. And then on the right, you can see the final outcome, and it's the OTL already made. You can see that we have a couple of buttons, although I'm not showing the full interface of the OTL, but I'm also creating, using the buttons to create other OTLs. In this case, it's the geometry feedback and the constraints feedback, which I'm going to explain in a lot of detail when we get to that. And in order to show you this, how to approach the problems and how to keep good practices, we need projects, of course. And for that, we're going to do some destruction. But that destruction is just an excuse to teach you how to create the tools and how to keep good practices. So I also want to tell you what this workshop is not. And I think it's very important to know that it is not an introductory workshop. So I'm not going to go into the fundamentals of Houdini, like, for example, I'm not going to talk about the interface. I'm not going to explain you what procedural means or what it is a node. I'm just going to go ahead and use Houdini. And I will expect that you already know how to use it, at least to some degree. You don't need to be an expert. You don't need to be a senior artist, but at least you are familiar with it and you feel confident. If you don't know enough about Houdini yet, there's plenty of workshops already on Rebelway that you can have a look into, and I'm pretty sure you're going to learn a lot from them. So what's going to be the learning approach? Because we're going to be doing a lot of different things, I'm going to separate usually the approach in two things. First, I'm going to explain the concept. I'm going to talk you through what we need to do, why we need to do it, how we're going to do it. And usually I'm going to use my draws on Photoshop, as you can see on the left, where I'm going to explain a formula. In this case, I'm just doing some vector operations, and I'm going to explain you why we need those operations. And then on the right, you can see the implementation happening in VEX. I'm going to use a lot of VEX, but you can use VOPs if you feel like using VOPs. But this is just one example of like the approach of concept and implementation. And you can see the same here. You can see that I'm explaining some operations on the left using, again, Photoshop. And this is something we are going to be doing to replace leaves on trees. And we're going to be creating some matrix operations. We're going to be creating some functions. And on the right, you can see the VEX implementation happening. So there's always that distinction between the concept and the implementation. And I'm going to go back and forth between both of them all the time. And another thing I'm going to do a lot, it's before we start actually setting things up on Houdini, I'm going to go through what we're going to need. So in this case, you can see, for example, that I'm breaking up the shot. In this case, is the first project that we're going to do. I'm breaking everything up into the systems that we need. We are going to be doing some RBDs. We're going to be doing some grains, particles, and pyro. And for each one of them, I'm basically explaining what we're going to do. And then after that, I go even more granular. And then I start saying, okay, for the RBDs, we're going to receive an animated spaceship. We're going to have to do some metal bending, some guided simulation because the spaceship it's animated. And we're going to have to do some constraints, of course. Additional to that, we are going to have to do some ground destruction and also some trees dynamics. So you can see that I'm trying to break up every single step into individual steps, so we know what we're going to do. So now let's talk about the projects. As I mentioned before, we need projects to teach what we're going to learn, right? Otherwise, I'm just going to be doing a bunch of effects on top of a box, and that's not fun at all. So we choose two projects. One, it's going to be the spaceship crash, and the other one is going to be a sort of big scale ground destruction. And the spaceship crash just involves a spaceship crashing on the ground. I'm going to show you in a moment. And the ground collapse, we're going to receive an environment and a fortress, some rocks, and we're going to be setting up the dynamics for all those objects. So you can see this is kind of a preview or a GIF of what we're going to be doing for the spaceship crash. We're going to be doing some some geometry preparation. As an FXTD, you will find yourself prepping geometry for hours and hours. Probably you're going to spend more time prepping the geometry than actually, doing the setup. So on the left, you can see that's not the final result, but it's very close to the final result. And on the right, you can see an a contact sheet of the elements that we're going to be creating. So you can see that we have the spaceship, which is going to be made of metal. The metal needs to deform. Some elements of the spaceship are going to fly away from, they are going to get detached. We're going to be simulating some 3D dynamics. We're going to do particle dynamics. And in general, it's going to be packed with different things to learn. And this is going to be the most complex shot, not because of the complexity of the shot itself, because the project itself is, as I said, an excuse to teach you how to create tools. We're going to spend a lot of time creating the tools and the different OTLs. Just to let you know, I'm going to call OTLs and HTAs. For me, they are the same thing. And I'm going to also explain why in one of the videos. So you're going to hear me saying OTLs a lot. But I think nowadays they are called HTAs. So this is the first project. And then the second project is this one, where we're going to be doing this kind of big scale destruction. And on the left, you can see all the elements. And you can see there's going to be some trees, although the setup for the trees on this shot is going to be slightly different. We're going to have a fortress. We're going to learn how to split the smoke simulation into different wedges. And so you can simulate it on your own computer in case you don't have access to a render farm. I didn't have access to a render farm here, so I did my best to be able to simulate everything. But in here, we are no longer going to be creating that many tools because we already created the tools on the first project. So in here, I think this is going to be more straightforward because we are going to basically go ahead and run the shot. We're going to create probably 1 or 2 OTLs additional to the ones that we have on this project. But I think this one is going to be easier to do than the first one. So I'm going to also talk a lot about OTLs. Actually, we're going to be creating OTLs pretty much the first half of the workshop. So I'm going to talk to you about how to generate OTLs, what's the difference between single definition and multiple definitions OTLs, what's the difference between editing the parameter interface of an OTL versus adding spare parameters to a subnetwork, and how definitions are stored in disk and how they behave like kind of blueprints for tools. I'm going to also explain what are the good practices for working with OTLs, what are the risks of having multiple people working on different OTLs at the same time, and how that can affect potentially renders that are on the farm or jobs that some other people are doing if they are using your OTLs. So I'm going to talk about that quite a lot. And I'm going to also use a little bit of Python on the HTA module of the OTLs, but we're not going to look into Python that much. So if you're not familiar with Python, you don't need to worry. I'm going to explain what each line of code is doing and why we are writing that code. So I think there's no reason to worry. And yeah, this is something I was saying before. I'm going to explain what's the difference between a single OTL definition and multiple OTLs definitions, and which is the advantages and disadvantages of each case. So let me show you what we are going to be creating. We're going to make multiple different OTLs for different purposes. So in here you can see a sample of the geometry OTLs that we're going to be doing. And you're gonna, at this point, I think it's quite boring to tell you what each one of those OTLs do, but you can see that each one of these OTLs is gonna be explained in detail once we get to the actual workshop. And we're gonna create constraints, tools that are going to handle constraints, are gonna manipulate attributes on those constraints, and also generate the primitives. We are going to create tools for ground interaction. So for example, when the spaceship is hitting the ground, we of course need a lot of particles to be emitted. We need the ground to be deformed. We need to fracture the ground, and we need all those fractures to have some velocity. So all these OTLs take care of that, and they can be used for other purposes, not only for the spaceship crash. And that's something I think is very important. What we are doing is not for the projects, are tools that you can use in any other project. And I'm making them, or I'm creating them in a way that they are generic enough so you can keep working on them and making them better. And we are also going to be, as I said before, we are going to be doing some trees. And I'm going to have one file where I'm going to explain you different techniques for rigging trees for dynamics using rigid body dynamics. And we're going to be creating a wrapper for Bullet. And basically what a wrapper is, it's kind of a box or a container that contains a setup. And in this case, we are creating a wrapper that contains a Bullet setup. And that's something that SideFX is doing a lot these days. You will see that there's like subs implementations for Bullet, sub implementation for Pyro, and so on. And all those things are wrappers that we didn't have before. But usually when you work in a big company, there's senior artists or leads or supervisors who were creating wrappers. So if you don't know how to create a network from scratch, you go ahead and use that wrapper, and you don't have to know the insides of the OTL. So we're going to be creating one for Bullet. And I think it's also important to let you know what the prerequisites are for the workshop. And I expect that you have some familiarity with VEX and VOPs. And you don't need to be an expert, because honestly, I'm not going to be creating like anything super complex. Because again, my focus is the setup. I don't want to trick you or to like teach you the most complex code that you will ever see. It's going to be fairly simple. Might get a little bit tricky with the with some linear algebra that we are going to use, but again, I'm going to try to I'm going to do my best to explain it. But in general, if you know what variables are, how to deal with attributes in a Wrangle, you are good. You need to be especially comfortable with subs and dubs, because that's what we're going to be using. The other contexts, I'm not going to be explaining them. We are going to stick to subs and dubs. So some familiarity with it, it's necessary. You need to be familiar with attributes and what they are, how to create the attributes, and how to use them. Having also some understanding of vector operations, like addition, subtraction, and maybe even some matrix operations. And that's going to help you a lot, because I'm not going to explain what a vector subtraction or a vector addition is. I'm not going to explain what a dot product is. I'm going to go ahead and use those concepts. Although, again, I'm going to be kind of drawing things on Photoshop all the time, trying to explain why we are doing what we are doing. And especially, I think the most important thing at the end is that you need to have the will to research and try things on your own, because my focus here is to teach you workflows. I'm not gonna be iterating like forever until I get the perfect smoke that it's behaving like. I think that's the job of the student, to get to that perfect smoke. And what I want to give you is kind of like a guidance, so you can reach that result on your own. So yeah, I think these are the prerequisites. As long as you have this basic knowledge, you should be good to go. And yeah, that should, I think that's it for the presentation.
Oh, that was great, Hernan. One thing I particularly love is that there's a very practical application of being an FXTD or working in Houdini at a big studio here, with your ship crash and the ground cracking and destruction work. I mean, they are shots that you would typically work on a big Netflix show or a big film. And so basically, by doing this course, people are going to get a very insidery look at how things work at a visual effects studio. That's the intention, right?
Yeah, that's why we kind of choose those shots. So you are not just looking at a lot of like techniques, but at the implementation. Because sometimes you see tutorials that they explain you how to do something, but they don't do it in a kind of real context. And usually things work very nicely when you do them on spheres and on cubes, but when you try to implement the same technique on a real shot, then things break apart. So I was trying to do something more meaningful in that sense, that can be used, you know.
Yeah. The other thing about this Studio FX Workflows course is, I feel it's all about taking your own career. Maybe you are an FX artist, or you want to, you've been doing some Houdini work and you want to take it to the next level. I sometimes think it's fun to chat to people like you about what that next level involves. And maybe people don't always know what an FXTD is and, what the roles are. for an FXTD. So, and then I'm going to ask you, in your experience, what are the general responsibilities of an FXTD at a visual effects studio?
Yeah, so I'm going to try to give a brief description. And it depends really on whether you're a junior, mid, or a senior. But let's say, like, I'm going to explain one by one. So if you are a junior, you're not expected to know like how to create tools, how to create solvers, you're not expected to know anything like that because you are fresh in the industry. You are there to learn and to help people. So when you enter as a junior, usually you are going to be executing shots. You're going to be running shots, and you're going to be using tools made by seniors or by leads or supervisors. So most of the time, you're going to be learning the pipeline of the company. You're going to be learning how to run the tools that are proprietary or made by people inside the company. And that's going to take a long time. Like usually learning all the tools of a company, and especially the pipeline and how to share data between departments takes time. Even if you're a senior, that takes a long time when you go to a new company. So as a junior, you are expected to run shots, be familiar with Houdini. And I think the most important thing is you are expected to have this willing to learn a lot. Like you know, they want to see you trying new things, like looking for help. Don't feel bad if you have to look at the help of Houdini, because this is something kind of funny. Like I see juniors that they are afraid of showing that they have a tutorial open or they have the help open, but then you see supervisors with the help and the 3 tutorials open in their screen. So I think you should not feel ashamed of that. Like we are all learning. Doesn't matter if you've been in the industry for 20 years, you are learning all the time and you are teaching all the time. It's kind of, you know. And if you are a mid artist, then responsibilities grow a little bit. You are expected now to be able to create your own setups, provide more support to the senior artist and to the lead. So responsibilities grow in the sense that now you are expected to have more knowledge in terms of technical skills and artistic skills. So your work is should start to look better. You should need less help from your supervisors, and I think that's something that shows if you are a senior or a junior or a mid, is how much attention do you need? Like, can they let you do your own stuff on your own and without giving you any supervision, or do you need a lot of help? Like usually juniors will need more help. And if you are a senior, then you're expected to create tools. You're expected to run shots to create setups and maintain setups. Sometimes you are going to be the stakeholder, for example, of the bullet tools or the flip tools or stuff like that. If you're a lead, then you have all the responsibilities, plus you need to become a manager. And that's why I think you can't really teach anybody to be a lead. You can give someone the tools to start on their own and eventually become a lead. But that leading position is mostly a managing kind of a position. You know, like you're going to be, the team is going to depend on you, and you're going to be scheduling things. You're going to be doing a lot of spreadsheets, you know, taking care of the team basically and making sure that everything is running smoothly. Those are kind of, that's what I think are the responsibilities. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I think in the course, you'll also be outlining some of the technical requirements, but you're also assuming people have, you know, a base level of technical skill. But I am curious about how in your own career, how you felt you progressed. And, you know, people might want to be advancing their own careers as an FXTD. What were the things that you felt you did to get to the next stage all the way up to senior, which is what you are now?
Yeah, it really depends on your background, right? Because as I said before, like if you say, for example, you went to school to learn arts, then you're going to be very good. You're going to have a very good eye, but you're going to be a little bit behind on the programming skills. But if you have a bachelor or a degree on computer science, then you're going to be stronger on the technical side, but then you're going to have to learn the artistic kind of aspect of the industry. So it depends how you like progress in the career depends a lot on your background. In my case, I've been always trying to like learn as much as I can. So I invest a lot of time like either watching tutorials or reading books, not necessarily about Houdini, but about CG in general, because I think the most important concept you need is how computer graphics works, because those fundamental concepts apply not only to Houdini, but to any piece of software, really. And having that fundamental knowledge is going to help you. It's going to kind of open your mind to try new solutions, to debug problems that might be happening. So I think learning those fundamentals, it's the crucial part. Like, go and try to learn some linear algebra, learn how vectors work, how they are used within the context of visual effects. That's going to really help you. So it's mostly that willing to learn. And I think the most important thing that I don't see very often mentioned in tutorials or anywhere, you just need you need to be nice. Like, be nice with people, you know. Like, I think that's the most important thing. Like, you try to be the nicest guy, and people is going to be nice with you, and you just keep this good vibe, you know, and you're going to be learning from everybody. So, you know, don't be a rock star, just try to be nice with everybody, you know.
I think that's great advice. I asked you earlier what some of the tougher things were about being an FXTD, and only because I wanted you to be open about that straight away. But a similar sort of question, in your experience at some of these visual effects studios, and also just seeing what people do with their Houdini workflows, what are some of the mistakes people tend to make? What are some of the mistakes you've made that you've also learned from?
Yeah, I think the most common mistake, and it's not even a technical mistake or anything like that, is just organization. And I'm saying this because I mean, I could tell you, like, maybe you are not naming your notes correctly, or but that everybody knows that. What you need to know is that you need to be organized from the beginning, because things get more complicated over time. You know, like, the shots are not going to get easier; they're just gonna get more difficult, and you're gonna get notes and notes over notes, and you're gonna be addressing those notes all the time. So the cleaner your scene is, the easier it is to maintain, and the easier it is that for someone else to pick up your scene. You know, that's part of being nice to other people. Keep your scenes clean, because you never know who's gonna use them. You know, and there's nothing nicer than picking someone else's scene and seeing like something that it's really clean. It's easy to understand. So yeah, organization is one of those problems, and the other one is just adding too much complexity from the beginning. So if you imagine, like, you are drawing something, yeah, you are painting, right? You don't go ahead and paint the details from the beginning. You know, like, the way I work is I try to create a version as soon as possible, even though it doesn't look great. I don't care about making it look great at the beginning. I'm worrying about having all the steps laid out in there, and creating one iteration, potentially even goes through comp and everything and lighting. So at least we know what problems we might have, and we don't have to wait until the end just to know if the AOVs that we are creating are correct, or maybe the attributes that we are exporting are broken. So, you know, creating that first iteration sooner rather than later is going to help you, and it's going to help the rest of the team. So yeah, organization, and and basically try to create an iteration as soon as possible.
Brilliant. Well, Hernan, I think that's great advice generally to all VFX and CG artists, but very specifically, if you do this Studio FX Workflows course with Hernan, you'll get much more practical insight into the process of setting up these Houdini workflows and what it takes to be an FXTD at a big visual effects studio, which Hernan has lots of experience on. That's been awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Hernan. I can't wait for the course.
No, thanks. Thank you for having me here. And yeah, I'm really proud to be part of Rebel Way. It's been a great chance.
Awesome. Everyone can check out the course details at rebelway.net. Thanks, Hernan. Thanks, Rebel Way, for asking me to do this. Catch you guys soon.
See you guys.
Bye.